much for coming out tonight on this rainy, cold night. Of course, for northern Maine, this is probably balmy weather, right? It's not snowing or what have you. Before I go into my presentation, I just want to mention a few things here. I have a little sign-in sheet. The information you give me stays with me for email purposes. So if you're interested in getting information about us on a regular basis, events that we have in the area. And I want to thank Bob Roy for sort of getting the ball rolling up. We have a lot of meetings up in the Fort Kent area, Presque Isle area. But we have a lot of contacts down here, so it was Bob's idea to bring it down here, so I'll bring it up. Well, to me it's up here, but it's not as far as I normally go. We have some material that I'm going to be talking about during my presentation. You always see, you know it's a John Birch Society meeting when there's a well-stocked book table, right? And if someone says it with a Birch Society and there isn't anything on the table, probably not with a Birch Society, right? Anyway, one of the books that I say is a primer to talk about this problem is a book called Shadows of Power, back in 1988 by Jim Perloff, who actually went to Colby College, a former leftist that sort of asked the questions and got the answers. And he looked at these, the establishment that was they were working against. He was a Vietnam era leftist, you know, burn baby burn, down with the pigs, etc. And then he realized that some of the money that supporting their groups that he was interested in was coming from the big foundations, the Ford, the Rockefeller. So he asked the question, why are they giving us money? And the answer that he got back from people was, well, they're either afraid of us and they're trying to buy us off. Two, they're either trying to control us. Or three, maybe they created us. And maybe, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that tonight as well. So it doesn't deal with supporting local police specifically, but if you look at this organization, which is 3,500 members, and how much power they have, it's the most powerful private group in the country. And whether it's Common Core, whether it's Agenda 21, or these numerous problems that are facing our nation, you can almost go back to these big foundations, and then we can technically go that. I'm going to be talking about a couple of documents that have been out of print for a long time. One of them is called Freedom from War, this U.S. program for general and complete disarmament in a peaceful world. And I have copies, and we just put these in print. A friend of mine sat for one of my presentations and had made reference to these, and he said we had to get these back in print. So he put the money up to do that. And these are also available in PDF format, and I'd be happy to send that. And by the way, you can have these slides if you want anything here. And another one called A Communist Plot Against the Free World Press. This was back in 1961 at congressional hearings. The fellow that was testifying had evidence that they found a communist operative in Europe, somewhere in Western Europe, and the plan was not just to control, but to actually infiltrate and bring down local police departments all over the world. The New American Magazine is the official magazine of the John Birch Society, and we have every now and then we have special issues. This one deals with the topic at hand, and we've distributed these all over the country, and we've done this with this issue. I only have a few of these, actually a couple of reprints. We mailed out over 15,000 copies to every single police department, sheriff's department, state police, and in the bigger cities, every police, not just chiefs, but captains as well. I don't know how many other organizations do something like this. And we're not a big organization, although after tonight we'll probably add a few more members, hopefully we'll be a little bigger. And one of the articles in here exposes the Southern Poverty Law Center. The Southern Poverty Law Center identifies you people as the terrorists and the real threats, you see. And they have a lot of influence with the police departments. Now, there's nothing wrong with advocating, eradicating poverty. That's not their mission, though. And they're worth about $250 million. So if it's poverty they're trying to stop, they should start with their own house and disperse their funds. But thankfully, just recently, the FBI said, we don't want your stuff anymore. And I like to think that our educational efforts had something to do with that. And we have bumper stickers, and we have window decals, support your local police. And we're asking people to get these, distribute these. We're asking businesses, to put them on their storefronts, what have you. And then we have a few pamphlets and other items to deal with this campaign. We'll be adding as the campaign goes on. For those of you who are new to the John Birch site, I'll give you a quick little overview. The John Birch Society was founded back in 1958 in December by the late Robert Welch of Belmont, Massachusetts, through North Carolina. Robert Welch was the owner or the inventor of the Sugar Daddy and the Sugar Baby and the Junior Mints. So he must be a pretty decent guy, right? He was a brilliant man, and he was named after Captain John Morrison Birch, a World War II hero. He was a missionary to China prior to our involvement in World War II, and he rescued two of the Doolittle bombing crews. Some of you remember that, but you're aware of that. And he became an intelligence officer. He served under General Claire Chennault, one of the good generals of World War II. And 2 weeks after the war was over, after the treaty on the Big Mo was signed in September, he was on an intelligence mission, and he was brutally murdered by the Chinese communists under orders. He would have been a real threat in a post-China to the communists. And our State Department hushed up how he was killed. Robert Welch, the founder, was very active in Republican politics at that time, and he got some information. He got from a senator in California, Senator Nolan, and he wrote a little book called The Life of John Birch. And in 1958, when he founded the John Birch Society, with the permission of his parents, he named it his own. So John Birch was never a member of the John Birch Society, but his parents were. I had the honor of meeting his nephew, who was almost a dead, it looked so much like him, who actually was named in John Birch's honor. I also got a chance to meet one of the Doolittle co-pilot. I think it was Robert Height, back with my son and a few of my nephews. I said, you're going to meet some real heroes. We met 5 or 6 of the Doolittle Raiders back in, I think, 2005, 2004. And he fondly remembered John Birch, so I was very pleased I was able to make that kind of connection. The purpose of the John Birch Society is to educate and inform and activate people to have a keen appreciation of the founding documents of our country, the Constitution, the fact that morality is essential to freedom and liberty. Without it, you can't have immorality and freedom. And that there are some powerful forces in this country and up and around the world that are bringing forth what they call a new world order. They've changed that term a little bit. Now it's global governance, what have you. Some of you may remember when you saw the former President, George W. Bush, announce at a joint session of the House and Senate the purpose of the Gulf War was to bring forth a new world order, and a UN is envisioned by its founders. Well, George Bush was a pretty bright guy. He went to Yale. He was the head of CIA, wasn't he? And he was a congressman. I know a little about the UN. I knew who the founders were, and most Americans did not. No, so I don't think he would have said that. The UN founders included communists, socialists, internationalists. Alger Hiss, the spy, wrote the UN Charter. So would I want something founded by those people? Was that something I'd aspire to? If you believe in liberty, freedom, limited government. So anyway, we have local chapters all over the country, and the local chapter is all volunteer organization. And we're not a large organization. We like to be large, of course, but we're very influential. I'll give you a quick little story. We know about Agenda 21, that it's real, that it's not a theory. A little town of Ringe, New Hampshire, in the southwest corner, where we have our summer camp called Camp Constitution, directly connected to the John Birch Society. I discovered that Agenda 21 was coming in through something called a charrette. Now, you people, some of you speak French, up here, charrette is a meeting, right? It's another term for a visionary session, and they had the copy of the charrette's results. And I wrote a letter. So a letter can be a potent weapon. I wrote a letter to the local newspaper about Agenda 21. I don't think they published it, but I posted it on the Facebook page of the town of Ringe. Within a short time, the so-called progressives in town went after me viciously. That meant I was onto something, right? And if they just kept their mouth shut, they would have never been. So they weren't smart enough to realize that. A couple of people in town that didn't like those so-called progressives got hold of me. And within a short time, they held a meeting. They had 200 people at this meeting. Now, Ringe is a small town. 200 people, almost everybody from that town. And within 5 months, 2 mailings to the town, to members of the town, and the warrant articles, which I don't know if you call them here, as a referendum question. There were 4 questions, all of them dealing with aspects of Agenda 21, 4-to-1 margin in favor of liberty. And they got rid of the selectmen, and they got 2 planning board members. And they have a little group there, and they now are watchdog. It didn't exist 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And they had a solar program they were trying to bring in. They got rid of that. They got out of their regional planning commission. They said anytime money comes from HUD, Housing and Urban Development, that will have to be voted on, so you can't just grease a few palms at the unelected level. And in the wake of that, a blog was created. The John Birch Society has stolen our town. You know how many members we had in that town at that time? We had one. And that person had very little because he joined right in the middle of this. We now have a few more. So it just goes to show the influence has a big impact. And we can win. It's not like we have to, nothing we can do about it. We sit on our hands and say it off. So anyway, let me get to my presentation. Support your local police and keep them independent.
Could I ask you one question before?
Sure, yes.
In this publicly, and don't take offense to this.
I won't.
A couple of things I've heard about the John Birch Society, and I'm completely ignorant, is they don't like Jewish religion.
Well, you have to ask our Jewish members what they think about that. A dear friend of mine who just passed away, Sam Blumenfeld, he bequeathed his library to me. And a lot of the things, we're uploading a lot of his unpublished things. He was the founder of the Society of Americanist Jews, Jewish Society of Americanists. And that was sort of a JBS offshoot. So that was back in the 60s. So we welcome the participation of people of goodwill. Unlike the government that asks you all these ridiculous questions, what religion you are, how tall you are, what do you have a gun? We just ask you for your name and your mailing address. So no, we've been accused of being racist, anti-Semitic, anti-Catholic, anti-Protestant, you name it, right? We've been called communists, we've been called fascists. Well, we can't be all of them, right? And I've got some Jewish ancestry in me. When I first joined, I wanted to make sure that wasn't an issue, and it's not. So that's, and again, we have Jewish members in the organization, and we're very glad to have them. So today's violence, reminiscent of the, hope you all can see it, 60s and 70s, 1960s, black and white, 2000 and so. It's a little more high resolution, but the same old, right? Now, I remember some of this. I was only 56, but I remember the riots around the country. I remember the hippies, and I remember the forced busing in Boston. I was involved in that, so I can discuss about my own personal experiences. The John Birch Society stopped the movement for a national police force. It set the communist movement, yes, we say communist, not liberal or socialist, but communist movement back 25 years. How? You see billboards all over the country. That's how you have local, so we have local chapters all over the country that could do this. We had floats and parades, which we still do. And Robert Welch, the founder, would happen to be at in New York City, going into a hotel, and there was some New York City policemen that had recognized him. And they went up to him and they said, "Are you Mr. Welch of the John Birch Society?" He said, "Yes. We want to thank you for saving our police department." And Robert Welch said, "Well, thank you, but I don't deserve the credit." We had 5 committees in each borough exposing, they would try to get what they call a civilian review board in that town, in the city, which would have been staffed with people that would make the policeman's job impossible. So, anyway, someone called me up, was kind of excited a few days ago. They saw a movie with Goldie Hawn. He said, "I saw in the car, there was a car with a bumper sticker that said, support your local police." Yeah, that was probably our sticker in that movie. A communist plot against the free world press, as I just mentioned. American National Police Force was a main linchpin in the communist plan for subjugating America and with it the world. Just 1930s, there was, I think, 100 things the Communist Party wanted to accomplish in the United States before they could take it over. And a man named Cleon Skousen, who was a friend of ours, he's since passed away. He was actually a police chief of Salt Lake City. He was an FBI agent for a while. He became the founder of the National Center for Constitutional Studies. He wrote a book that came out in the 60s, and I think it was called The Attack on the Free World Police, or it was based on this, and he listed these goals that were formulated in the 1930s. One of them, by the way, was the Department of Education. And how did we get that? Jimmy Carter wasn't a card-carrying communist, was he? And then Ronald Reagan was going to abolish it. You remember that? He didn't. Ronald Reagan wasn't a card carrier. But you see, the agenda, what becomes unacceptable 50 years ago, becomes mainstream. Can you imagine 50 years ago somebody said men will marry men, and if you oppose it, you would be the bad guy. That will never happen. Well, how about socialized medicine? That will never happen. And now we have it. So, this document, which I showed you a little while ago, Freedom from War, the United States Program for General and Complete Disarmament in a Peaceful World, 1961. John Kennedy did not write that, but he introduced this to the United Nations. And I'm just going to read you one excerpt from this that should trouble you. Page 18, it's only about 23 or 24 pages. Stage 3 stages to accomplish their objective, right? The manufacture of armaments would be prohibited except for those of agreed types and quantities used by the UN Peace Force. Let me stop there. The UN Peace Force. Do a little search online and put UN Peace Force atrocities. Because most people, if you're a high school student in a public school, you're going to think this is an organization. They have UN Day, they have UN, model UNs, even in private schools and even Christian schools do some of do this. You think, wow, these guys come in, they just bring peace with them. Starting in Katanga in the early 60s, what is now the Zaire, these peacekeepers, usually white when it comes to black nations, murdered. In fact, I showed Bob a letter from the head of Katanga, Motse Shombe. He was a pro-West leader. And the UN went in there and raped, murdered, they bombed hospitals, and you didn't hear about it. In 1961, unless you were connected to the Birch side or some other patriotic type groups, you never heard about it, right? And you probably won't hear about it if you go to the UN, which I did a few years ago, and look at their bookstore. Nothing about Katanga in there, right? Okay, and more atrocities. Ivory Coast, the UN mission there just a few years ago, they actually fired upon civilians. They thought they were supposed to help them, and when they were raping their children, the people demonstrated in front of the UN, one of their command centers, they opened fire on them. How come you didn't hear about that? How about Somalia, when they had UN troops? I have a picture of 2 white soldiers from Belgium. I know many of you here are military, former military. I don't know about you. I know when I went to basic training, they said that you were never supposed to obey an unlawful order. Torturing people is not. My dad saw Hermann Goering captured in World War II. They didn't torture him, and he probably was a little bit worse than this poor Somalian national, but we show him 2 white soldiers smiling, enjoying their job as they're holding this man over a fire. Okay, how come you didn't see that on your national news? And you know who wrote the story? The Village Voice, of all newspapers, right? It was a left-wing newspaper in New York City, and we were one of the second ones to do it, you see. So let's finish here. In those required to maintain internal order, all other armaments would be destroyed or converted to peaceful purposes. So how do you convert a peaceful purpose? When I take your gun, I give it to a UN or a national police. That's how you convert. That's their definition of a peaceful purpose. This is still the policy of the United States government. Okay. Now, most politicians in Congress have never heard of this, or they'll deny they ever heard of it. But when was the last time you saw the United States government roll back something like this? We also want to point out, we've done a lot of articles in our magazine about the militarization of local police and how local police are getting federal money, and they're getting militarized vehicles. They're being trained by the FBI and other entities, federal government entities. And in some big cities, you see cameras all over the place, and all this money's coming from the federal government. And you know, it's just like Common Core. Hey, you take this side unseen, we'll give you the money, do what you want with the money, but you got to take the program afterwards. In many cases, you get a small town like Keene, New Hampshire. Keene's a small college town. There aren't any major, they have their problems like anybody. A little town like this has their problems. But why do they need to have militarized vehicles? And they have them. Well, because the town fathers said, hey, we're getting money, we don't have to raise taxes, so we'll just take the money. But what happens after that money runs dry? Now they have to use that equipment, and they have to pay for it locally. So this is some evidence that what we're saying is absolutely true here. 6 cities chosen to have nationalized police force. This was a recent article, and what came from? It may have been, what's the New American? So you can actually do a search on your own. Please don't accept anything I say, okay, as gospel truth. Verify it, right? And it mentioned the cities Fort Worth, Texas, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Where else we have here? Gary, Indiana, Stockton, California, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. In this case, the liberal mayors and police chiefs are asking for the Obama administration to come in. It's not, they're not being forced to, they're being asked to by the Obama administration. Now, Cleveland, this is about 2 years old, Cleveland accepts federal standards and mandates. If you remember the riots in Cincinnati, Ohio, back maybe about 10 years ago, Cincinnati was under that jurisdiction. You remember the Rodney King incident? They had a task force. They were advocating, I think it was Henry Kissinger that wrote an article about it, suggesting UN troops be used to quell these types of things. And it was Warren Christopher, that used to be part of the Clinton administration. He was in charge of the study, advocating a nationalized police force. What else would you expect from someone with that pedigree? Now, as you mentioned, I think it was Phil mentioned earlier, it's not just national police, it's international. This was Loretta Lynch. She went to the UN, and you can find this article almost anywhere online. Obama administration and UN announced global police force to fight extremism in the United States. Again, we're talking about some of these Muslim ISIS cells that are setting up, the inner city gangs, maybe the Chinese communists that have been, coming into our country. No, it's you guys. You guys that believe in the Second Amendment. You guys that believe that you're pro-life. Maybe you have a sticker that says support your Constitution, or how about a returning veteran? Remember a few years ago, Homeland Security head Janet Napolitano? Yep. They had a report, what to look out for, returning veterans. Imagine that. I was just after the Vietnam era, slightly. The Vietnam era veterans, they caught hell. They were baby killers, they were all kinds of evil things, right? But at least the federal government didn't affirm that. Now they're doing that, you see. Thankfully, that because of such an outcry, that report was rescinded. Without this national police force, they could not move the rest of their plans forward, since they would be not able to control the American people. We have waited an entire generation to again attempt a national police force. Working quietly behind the scenes, they are now breaking out into the open. Now here it's kind of interesting, when I see similar signs with similar websites in different parts of the country, what does that indicate? That indicates planning, right? Very few riots are spontaneous. The notion that, and all of a sudden these people hold up signs with the same website, revolutionarycommunistparty.us, right? The same printer, George Soros Graphics, maybe, I don't know what company does it, but whether it be Ferguson, whether it be Baltimore, or New York, or wherever. In fact, I think in the wake when the grand jury gave the policemen a clean bill of health, there was all kinds of demonstrations all over the country. They shut down some streets in Boston. People had nothing, they didn't know nothing about this guy. This thug who tried to keep the cop's gun, and he was exonerated. They didn't care. It's all about the riots and so forth. There's a black police chief, actually he's a sheriff in Milwaukee County, Wisconsin, Clark. And he said these people who are rioting the streets, he said if they bumped into these people that were killed by cops, he said they would probably shoot them. They'd kill them for a pair of sneakers. All of a sudden they're so angry and they're burning down their own neighborhoods. If I'm upset about something, I don't burn my house down. I don't burn the grocery store down the street from my house because that's where my son works there, part of a full-time job. I don't want him to lose his job. Why would I burn the grocery store down? That doesn't make sense, does it? Unless it's control. It makes sense if you're trying to destroy something, right?
Black Lives Matter.
And by the way, I want to point out, in this magazine, there's some great facts and figures and statistics. There are about 600, in 2013, 6,200 blacks were murdered, right, in the United States. 90% of the perpetrators were other blacks. There were 220 blacks killed by policemen, right? All of them, they were involved in violent crime. So you didn't see the cop goes up and just, I don't like the way you look because you're black, I'm going to kill you. That wasn't the case. But another fact is that, how many policemen were killed, about 45% of the people who killed policemen in that same year were also black. So does that mean all blacks are out to kill white policemen? No, that's a lie. In Baltimore, they've got a black mayor. I've been to Baltimore a number of times. They got a black mayor, a black police chief, and half the police force is black. And some of the officers involved are black. Same like in New York City, there was a man killed there after resisting, and there were black policemen involved in that. So is it really a black and white issue? Well, they're making it into a black and white issue. And yes, I know there is racism in the world. It will always be that way because we have a fallen sin nature. I think we have probably one of the best track records in the world, you know, the last 10, 15, 20 years. There's Al Sharpton. He's supposed to be a reverend, and he did get, when he was 9 or 10 years old, he got ordained as he was some kind of child prodigy. But I've never, if you go to YouTube, see if it's Al Sharpton sermon, you know, advocating, you know, accepting Jesus as your Savior and repent of your sins. Have you ever heard him say that? Never, okay? What the Bible says about people like him, in the Old Testament, it says, I think there are 7 things the Lord hates. One of them is a lying tongue. One of them is a feet that shed, go to violence, hands that shed innocent blood, and a man who causes discord among his brothers. He's made a living, and a very good living, causing discord among brothers. Now, you see him, even though he's not on, he did have a show, right? He's not on television anymore. It was his own show, was it MSNBC, what are those? But he's on all the neocon TV national shows. Why do they give this guy the time of day? Even when they give him trouble, right? He is getting in front of his people, and more funds come in. Every time he says something, he gets more donations. They don't give me they don't give anyone in here. Phil, when was the last time Sean Hannity called you on an interview, right? Yeah. How about John McManus at the John Birch site? Once? Maybe once? But they give this guy all the time to want. Here's what he's saying. Al Sharpton wants to end local policing, demands nationalized police force. Now, I thought the federal government was racist too. You know, you remember this guy, what was that? They did that experiment in Alabama during the Roosevelt administration. They had blacks who thought they were being treated for syphilis, and they weren't. Right? What was it now? I'm sorry. Tuskegee. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So he doesn't talk about that, does he? And other things have done over the years, right? Sharpened to hold a march in Washington to demand Department of Justice takeover of U.S. police departments. And he is one of many saying the same thing. Okay. Now, do you think someone's giving him a script? I would say so. Now, here's an old picture from the 60s, which you can probably tell. And if I told you, if I wrote the headline, the byline to this, I would say, white racist policeman viciously attacked black woman on the way to her choir practice, right? And you'd say, wow, you know, Hal, you're probably right, you know, maybe not in my town, but I'm sure down in Alabama, you know, where everyone is a racist if you're white, automatically racist. So you look at this, but what really happened here is that this lady got out of control and she grabbed a policeman's billy club. I don't know about you, but my dad told me never to grab a policeman's billy club. You just don't, there's things you just don't do. No, he never told me that specifically.
Touch Superman's cape.
That's right. You don't get a long range or a big Jim. Yeah, that's right. And they were simply trying to take it away from her. They could have done they could have. You didn't see her kick him in the head or anything like that. So and there's stuff like this all the time. You know, today they can doctor photos a lot easier. So there's no need for federal oversight. I mean, you have all these layers. Internal affairs. Now, in the big cities, you probably don't have internal affairs in this little town, for sure, right? But in big cities, Portland probably, maybe I know Boston, the internal affairs are really despised by because they're a little sometimes too aggressive. It's like when I worked in the post office, the postal inspectors, we did not like these people because they're always snooping on us, you know. But they kept you honest, right? So, chief of police, and I think most patrolmen that I know hate crooked cops. Hate them. And they want them out as quickly as possible because it makes them look all bad, you see. You don't read in the newspaper all the good things policemen do. You know, save so-and-so's life and did this and did that. You just read the bad things. So you must assume that's all they do is bad things. You know, and you just think, well, they're not doing bad things, we eat donuts in the donut shop. Everybody else goes to donut shops, but that's okay. But when cops do it, it's somehow bad. Right? City council, city attorney, county commissioners, state attorney general, governor, legislator, and ballot box. Any one of these entities can exercise oversight, yet these oversight layers are never mentioned. When's the last time you heard them on national TV mentioning that there are remedies to any local bad cops? They never say that. Now, I mentioned my forced busing experience. I remember I was running late to class. I went to Hyde Park High School. There was a lot of racial turmoil. The Progressive Labor Party came in. They had students that were in their 20s, and they burnt an American flag. That caused, but you didn't hear that when you just saw, white students and black students riot. But I was running late to class one day, and the hallway was empty. And except for a big marshal, a federal marshal, the guy was about this tall, about this wide. I think I was 16 at the time. And the headmaster, Michael Donato's son, Teddy, played for the Boston Bruins. So if you're hockey fans, you probably know that name. And the marshal just slammed me against the wall, and that hurt. And I was really upset with Donato because he was basically going along with us. I left school, cut out of school, and found a payphone. We used to have payphones in those days, not anymore. I called 911, and I said, I was a little precocious, at 16, and I said, I want to report a violent assault and battery that happened on Metropolitan Avenue at the Hyde Park High School. Oh, well, who did it? You know his name? He's a federal marshal. And the dispatcher said, oh, they're above the law. And they laughed. I wasn't going to get any, no remediation here. In that same time frame, there was an element of a group called the Tactical Police Force, a Boston police branch. They went into a bar room called the Rabbit Inn in South Boston, and they just swung their clubs at anyone moving. There was some anti-busing resistance going on inside that. There was a lot of planning going on. And there was a lot of nasty stuff. Guys they got their jaws broken hands. Those policemen were held accountable. They got in serious trouble. And that entity was wiped out. So there was accountability. Was there any accountability when a sharpshooter in the FBI shot a woman with a little baby at Ruby Ridge? The husband got some money 5 or 6 years later, but he never got his wife back or his boy back, you see. So, and that man got a promotion. Nothing happened to him. He didn't get put in jail. And I tell you, FBI sharpshooters are some of the best in the world. And you never take a shot when a situation like that. So, police corruption. If the local police are corrupt, it's a local, not national issue. If they are corrupt, it can be changed by the people. If the national police are corrupt, it is all over the country and unlikely to be changed without a major social and political upheaval. And what could happen is that bad cop in this town is transferred to a town in California, and you get that bad cop in California who comes here, and they don't care about the local citizens. They're not from here. They have no connections to the town, so they'd be more apt to enforce the nasty laws that will be coming down if it's successful. In Hungary, when they had an uprising, they didn't bring in any soldiers from Russia. They brought in Mongolians because they figured they don't have any connection to these people. So it's a tactic that totalitarian Jews bring people in from other parts of the country, or these people from a different culture. You think Mexican soldiers? In fact, they had some Mexican soldiers in Hurricane Katrina. Did you know that? They were asked to come in to help. Why did we need them? There were private citizens that were turned back. The basketball star, Karl Malone, was dispatched tons of vehicles for food, and he said, we don't need your help, but we'll take it in the federales. You know you're in trouble when Mexican police are coming to help you. That's right. Or Mexican soldiers, right? So, anyway, here we go. So there is a plan. The insiders are the people that either belong to this organization or have the same kind of worldview. They want a national police to control the American people. No socialist country has local independent police, and no state can be totalitarian without a national police force. Just look at the world, look at the whole world, and show me where you have total government and you have local police that are upholding the rights of the citizens. You don't have it, right? Now this was from 1943, a congressman from Pennsylvania. Local police forces obviously would be reduced as state and national police protection is increased. This fellow was Foreign Policy Association of Pennsylvania, which works, this was a few years before the UN was founded, but this entity works very close to the UN. This congressman's name is Joseph Clark Baldwin, in support of the Atlantic Charter. He went on to support the downsizing of U.S. armed forces before the formation of an international police force. That is the goal that was laid out formally in 1961, a standing world army. Okay. Now, what was going on in 1943? We all know it was World War II. And we were supposed to be saving the world from fascism, Japanese imperialism, and Nazism. where they have total police, right? Gestapo and the SS or what have you. Yet he got away with it. He should have been booed and thrown out, but he got away with it. So the mindset is there. Now, militia, but this is supposed to be a bad word. Why is it a bad word? It's in the Constitution. There are the 13 words, the first 13 words of the Second Amendment. What are they? A well-regulated what?
Militia.
Militia, being necessary for the defense of a free state. First 13 words. Is that changed any?
No.
Then how come we have to say it's a bad word? In Article 1, Section 8, there's reference that Congress's job is to ensure that states have militias so they may be used in time of turmoil, right? Never to be sent all over the world. What happened in 1903? Something called the Dick Act. They redefined it. The National Guard, which is not technically a militia, although they call it one, and they created something called the unorganized militia. Now, let's say that we want to have a baseball team here in Lincoln. You played softball 30 years ago. You played wiffle ball on weekends with your grandkids, right? You may have played college ball back there, back in the 50s or what have you, right? Is that a baseball, an unorganized baseball team? Militia, by its definition, has to be organized. Now, in Boston, Watertown, in fact, I lived very close to where that bombing took place. And what happened? In fact, I was up here. I was probably, I think you were there at the there was a Tea Party rally in Augusta. I think you were there. And Bob, or maybe a few of the others in the room here. They were looking for one guy, right? April 19th. The bombing happened on the 15th, April 19th. My job was to pick up Larry Pratt, right on his action. He was staying in a hotel by the airport, bring him to Lexington Green. And I got a call at about 6:30 in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and they said, Hal, you know, there's been there's a turmoil. I thought all of these cells were erupting all over the city, all these Muslim terrorist cells, and it was just pandemonium. I didn't know it was just one person. You know? And my poor wife was worried I was going to take my son, and I want to, you know, okay, no, I wouldn't put him in harm's way on purpose. So he stayed at home. I picked up Larry, had a few friends with me, and I see these big signs, shelter in place. I says, what the heck's that mean? Shelter, it means hide. Well, if you had a militia, if you had a real militia in Watertown or in Cambridge, they would have known these guys. They probably would have prevented the event from happening. You know, hey, why are these guys getting all this gunpowder all of a sudden? What's going on in that mosque that Mayor Menino and the governor, Deval Patrick, enabled? Hey, this thing's stuff. We're going to stop this. But that never happened because they don't exist. When they called out these special op guys with machine pistols and they drew people out of their homes, instead of saying, hey, if you see the guy, let us know. No, they threw everyone, talk about a drill for martial law. And they were cheering these bums. And then finally, the governor said shelter in place is over. And so reporters said, well, what's happened? Why is it over? Is the situation changed? And it hadn't changed. And then the guy went to have a cigarette in the back and he sees this guy in his boat. So the unorganized militia is the one that tipped him off, right? But there was no militia. And I say if there was, that wouldn't have happened. There is no constitutional prerogative for police to be controlled by the federal government. 9th and 10th Amendments. Basically it says that the powers granted to Congress or to the federal government are limited and defined. Those that are denied to the states are retained by the states and the people. By the way, states don't have rights. People have rights. States have powers. We use the term states' rights sometimes erroneously, right? States don't have rights. People in the states have rights. So that is pretty clear. There's nothing in the 9th and 10th. There's nothing in the Constitution that mentions education or police. In fact, police. The Constitution does not mention police power because police did not exist at that time. Local authority was through the sheriff and the militia. You know, this lady in Kentucky that wouldn't refuse to grant a license to a same-sex couple. She was upholding Kentucky law. The federal judge said to the sheriff, arrest her and put her in your jail. That sheriff should have arrested the judge and said, if you step foot in this county, we're going to put you in jail. That's how the system works. The Supreme Court, you can issue all the stupid opinions you want, but you can't enforce unconstitutional actions, right? And I think we can get to that. Let's see. The sheriff is a legally constituted and elected authority in the county. The militia is the state prerogative for unrest and the federal prerogative for invasion and rebellion, a citizen-run entity. And I also want to mention, too, one of our jobs is to help policemen become constitutionalists. There are a lot of them around. I want to give you an example too. Back in the mid-90s, I was manning an information table at the Tunbridge Fair in Vermont, beautiful location. And we had a feature story on the Brady Law, that had just been passed. And a fellow shows up and he's got like a jumpsuit with a badge. I had no idea. I thought he was just fair security. He's reading the article pretty intently. I said, oh, by the way, there's actually a sheriff in Vermont that's bucking the Brady Law. I said, yeah, that's me. I'm that sheriff. Sheriff Sam Frank of Orange County. And we got to become friends. He's now down in Virginia. I don't think he's in law enforcement. That was an elected position, by the way, in Orange County. And he said initially he had no interest. The Second Amendment wasn't the issue. The issue was that our poor county couldn't afford to implement the Brady Law. They passed a law, they had all these rules and regulations, and we can't do it. But along the way, he meets Sheriff Mack, Richard Mack of Arizona. He bumps into people like me. He became a constitutionalist, and he'd come by the table every year. He'd say, I want copies of the Constitution, and I want that quiz you've been given out here, because my deputy is a constitutionalist. They have no choice. So we helped to make people like Sam Frank better police officers, to uphold the law and not to, and you heard the story of Richard Mack. Richard Mack was a real gun-ho cop. You know, he was going to save the world. He loved giving out traffic tickets, and he set records for traffic tickets. And one day, it was late at night, this poor lady in a broken down Chevy with 4 or 5 children in the car. She runs a red light. He pulls her over, and he gives her a ticket. And he sees this poor lady. She probably had no gas in the car, and the kids look like they're kind of probably single parent, what have you. And he thought, is this what I signed up for? And he tore the ticket up, and that's when he decided to become a constitutionalist. So, anyway, J. Edgar Hoover. Regardless of what you made, whether you like him or dislike him, I guarantee you that a Hoover FBI would not have been shooting women with children in their hands. That would never have happened under J. Edgar Hoover. You would not have found J. Edgar Hoover going to Moscow like Louis Freeh did. Louis Freeh was the FBI director during the Clinton administration. He said, he went to Moscow, and he said to his FSB, KGB counterpart, together we are invincible. Could you imagine J. Edgar Hoover doing that in 1968? You know, so this is what J. Edgar Hoover said in 1968, February 1st. America has nor does it need a national police force. It should be abundantly clear by now that effective law enforcement is basically a local responsibility. In the great arena of self-government reserved for states, counties, and cities, the enforcement of the laws is not only their duty, but also their right. Law-abiding citizens and local officials should vigorously oppose concerted attacks against law enforcement in the devious moves to negate local authority and replace it with federal power. When was the last time you heard a federal official talk like that? Nobody from the Obama administration. I don't know too many people from the Bush administration, the more recent Bush administration. The destruction of federalism. And you use this term, most people don't know what it is. They think, oh, it's getting food stamps and WIC cards, that's what federalism is. That's not what it is. A national police would be controlled by the executive branch, completely destroying the federal balance of power between the 3 branches of government, the states and local government. An executive branch, the same executive branch that had something called Fast and Furious, where they were running guns into Mexico, right? To make it look like the gun. They want to do that to put more restrictions on the right to keep their arms, right? The call is not for Congress, but for the Department of Justice, really the Department of Injustice, the executive branch to have oversight. And they will. So here's an article here that Cleveland agrees to policing oversight. Once enough cities led by liberal leftist leaders acquiesce to federal oversight, the pressure for all cities to do so will be intense, and it will be bypass Congress. Boston has a liberal mayor, progressive. That's not his background, but he's just sold out. So he thinks he has to do that to be mayor and get support. There was a local talk show host, Jeff Cooner. I don't know if they carry a show up here. He's on WRKO. He had a rally. He didn't do it in concert with us, but that's fine. Supports a local police rally. And the mayor did not want any Boston policemen involved to participate. Why would you want that? Why wouldn't you want that? Isn't that good public relations? Does everybody have to be a screaming leftist, to get the mayor's support, right? He's the one that bullied that group in South Boston to allow so-called gay, floats and organizations to have a parade there. to participate in the parade. After the Supreme Court unanimously said it was a private entity, they could exclude anybody they want. Anyway, he told, and also when Obama was in town, back in Labor Day in Boston, these patrolmen turned their backs on him, like they did in New York City to their mayor. And the Boston Patrolmen's Association is a relatively conservative group of people. I got a chance to meet recently the Treasurer, Secretary, President, Vice President, and the fact that my late friend and the man who introduced me to John Birch Society was a co-founder helped a little bit too. And they're really sort of pathetic, and they know what's going on. And the bigger departments feel the heat more so than smaller departments. But one of the things I do in my travels, I used to travel to the Midwest, to the South, and all over New England and the Northeast. And I visit police departments on a regular basis, you know, between visits and calls with information like this. They almost all of them have bulletproof glass. Whether it be a little, like here, or it would be a city in Boston, you know. Why is that? Madawaska doesn't have them. That was something. Every now and then you find somewhere they don't have them, but maybe they're getting certain money to equip there. I don't know, but they all seem to have similar. And it's almost a psychological thing. The bad guys are outside. Now, well, who would go to a police station and open fire? Why would I go to a police station? If I'm a bad guy, the last place I want to be is in a police station where everybody has a gun. You know, that's why you don't see too many problems at gun shows. When's the last time you saw a riot at a gun show and a mass murder at a gun show? Doesn't happen, right? So anyway, so it's the so when the big city mayors all get on board, it's just a question of time that the other ones do. All in the name of police brutality. And again, I do admit you can't deny that does happen, right? I remember seeing a video recently where this black fellow was running for his life, and a cop was shooting. It didn't look like it was doctored. It looked like a clear violation of proper policing. Okay. So it was in the mid-1960s, and so it is today. The controlled media always attacks the police, not the rioters and communist cadre. People claim they do not believe the media, then believe the charges of police brutality. They read and see the media. What people see is the reaction by the police, not the provocation. In most cases, the Rodney King incident is a case in point. You saw maybe the last 30 to 40 seconds. You didn't see the first when this very big, strong guy. He was under some type of, he was drugged.
PCP.
He was, what's that?
PCP.
PCP. They had fired they had shot him with
Stun gun, I think.
a stun gun, and he didn't stop him. He knocked a couple of policemen down, and then you saw them hit him with the club. The people that were with him in the car, they didn't resist arrest. No one bothered. I don't even think got arrested. So if they were out to just beat up black people, they would have went after him too. So anyway, I showed this picture earlier. So here is a quote from an old dead white guy, right? Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that is true 100 years ago, it was true 2,000 years ago, and it's true today. And that's why our founders got together and they gave us a constitution that is strictly limited at all levels. And I don't care how many inventions we have, I don't care about the computer age, the jet age, or what have you, the space age, human nature does not change much. King Solomon said there is nothing new under the sun, right? And our founders knew that. So our Constitution is probably more valid today than it was 225 plus years ago, because it deals with human nature more than anything else. Our founders had a Calvinist perspective that we're pretty rotten without God's help. We're pretty rotten. And all you have to do is pick up any history book, even the bad history books. They tell you it's a series of wars and man's inhumanity to man. And one of the few, shining lights in mankind's history is what happened here in the United States. And they want to take that light and take that light out. So there's a two-pronged initiative that were our campaign, is to educate opinion molders on the dangers of the national police. So who's an opinion molder?
Press.
What's that?
Media, press.
Media. It could be the local reporter. It could be a local elected official. We have a few here. I'm very glad they're here. It could be the person you bought your car from, the person, your doctor, your dentist, the person who works in that restaurant that talks to everybody in town. These are just examples of opinion molders. And that's how you get a lot of people who, and everybody's a potential opinion molder, right? There are a lot of people who just don't want to be, especially with state. Anybody can have a blog and have a YouTube channel. You become a member of the media, right? The alternative media, but it's the media. Educate the police on the dangers of going to the federal government for solutions to local problems. We're encouraging people to get to know, I'll answer your question, I'm almost done here. Get to know that chief. Yesterday there was a police chief of Powell, was at our meeting at home. Everybody knew him. He lived there for 40 years. He moved up from Massachusetts, but he'd been here 40 years since he was a kid. People know him. He's a guy in the neighborhood. His kids go to school with their kids and so forth. There's a policeman that used to guard Mayor Menino, and his children went to his dance school with my daughters. You know, he's not gonna pull a gun on me because I have a copy of the Constitution. See, we're friends. That's the way it should be. And their mission is to uphold the life, liberty, and property of the citizens. You remember the old to serve and protect. That's what their purpose is. You know, and that's usually pretty much what they do. And yeah, and some cops have bad days, just like we all have bad days, and maybe they're a little short. Maybe they give you a ticket when you shouldn't have got one. But most people get tickets when they deserve them. Maybe you go speedy, go 90 miles an hour, maybe you should get a speeding ticket. No one likes to get them. I have an example where I was speeding through a town some years ago, and I got pulled over by a policeman. He was in his late 50s. And I had my get us out of the UN bump sticker on my car. I thought, gee, they're going to raise my insurance is going to go up, and I got a $50 ticket. That's a crummy way to start the day. And he came back about 5 minutes later, and he said, did you know Robert Welch? He's the founder of the other side. I thought, okay, I think I'm going to get a break here. I said, well, no, I never met him personally, but I read his material, so it's almost like I know him. You know? He said, you slow down and keep up the good work. I didn't get a ticket that day. So he appreciated what we do. Right. Yeah. So we need your help. Can you form and lead a local support your local police county level committee or however you want to work it? Can you help gift us the necessary funds? We need to implement a necessarily robust campaign. And what I'll probably prefer, if you're not a member, is to join, because the more members we have, the more influence we have. What do we need? We need new tools, videos, reprints, pamphlets, social media initiative. We already have a social media page, Support Local Police. And you can take all the information. There's a lot of videos on this topic, and just copy and paste on all these different social media sites. I was giving a presentation in the town of Attleboro, Massachusetts, and most police departments have Facebook pages, and they did have it. I was able to post the event, and then something's popped up, other groups you may be interested in. There's a group called Massachusetts Law Enforcement Support. It was made up of family members of local police. And I got a hold of them, went to their website, got their address, and they're going to be coming to our presentation we're having in a few weeks there in the South Shore. So there's been police benevolent societies, there's retired police organizations, even police veterans organizations. So these are all kinds of people that we need to work with. National law enforcement mailing contacts, national coordination to help local communities organize and strategize. We're not a big organization. We don't have as much money as the other, nearly like the other side has. You know, what we do for a few pennies, a few $100s compared to a few pennies, but we get a lot more done. Like I mentioned, we mailed us 15,000 copies of this out. We had a magazine in '93 called the Police State Issue. We got over 1.5 million hard copies distributed all over the country. We need to have more people to speak on this topic. You don't have to be a policeman. It helps, though, if you're a former policeman or in law enforcement, be a current policeman. I think it gives a little more credibility to the message. If I was talking to you about medical procedures, and I never operated on anybody, probably, yeah, you might have read a couple of books, Hal, or maybe watched a few, but you don't really have the credentials that a doctor would have. So that's why when we were working on the Obamacare, we had doctors out and speaking to it, talking about Obamacare. And we coordinate with our other organizations, local and national. Oath Keepers is one, for example. What's Oath Keepers made up of? They're made up of first responders, policemen, firemen, ambulance workers, what have you, and retired military, retired police. So it's a natural group, and I've reached out to them. I was at their first meeting in Lexington Green back in 2009, 2008, whatever year it was. That's where I got to see Sheriff Mack for the second or third time. I met him in the mid-90s. So I say, if we don't do it, who will? Any other organizations stepping up to the plate? And if they are, I'm glad that let's work with them. You know? So what else we have to do? So that's our website, jbs.org, and you can go on there, and they have an agenda section and support local police. Lots of updated information that you can download, videos, and so forth. So with that, again, I want to encourage you, if you're not a member, to become one tonight. Membership is only, it's 87 a year. Sounds like a lot of money at one click. It includes a new American magazine and a bulletin, a monthly bulletin. $87 a year is basically a cup of coffee a week. You know, it's really, and you have the chance to work with people to make campaigns like this successful. You can do it on a debit or credit card at $200 a quarter, and it's not that expensive. So any questions? If not, we can adjourn. Yes, sir.
I just had a personal experience, and you guys are more organized than this and understand, and I'm just coming in flat-footed here. But I was doing some service work down in Bangalore, and it was a local community cop, local police. And nowadays, they all got the bald head. I mean, it's like they're going through boot camp.
The buzz cuts, yeah.
The buzz cuts.
Yeah.
And, no, I'm not a very threatening person. I got talking to them, and I said, all right, come on. Tell me, what's the story here? Is this some kind of a cult or something or other? How is it that one job occupation can have identical haircuts?
Yeah.
I'm a plumber. We don't all have the same haircuts. You know what I mean? But he looked at me and he says, well, we are paramilitary.
Really? Yeah.
Are they formally paramilitary?
No.
I mean,
Not legally.
They got,
See, he's been trained.
that was verbatim his words. We are, after all, paramilitary.
No, it's a training they
walking
get.
big armored vehicle down there in back here.
You know, what was it back up, a few years ago in Mass Maritime, the main, yes, they were saying that these people, that call themselves sovereign citizens, are terrorists. And they define, what does that mean? I mean, it's so loosely defined. You know, so that element's there. So that's why I say our job is to help them become constitutionalists. So he's been trained a certain way. Now I know police do have standards. They have, they have to, have buzz cuts. But I know they go to an academy, they may get a buzz cut.
What's the definition of paramilitary? I understood we were, as policemen, because we respond to violent situations. But I didn't have buzz cuts, and a lot of guys on my department didn't either. Some did.
I'm from the old school where they serve and protect,
Yeah.
and my family's within the social stuff, and where he said that, I just want to, is it organized to that extent now? Because he said it fairly sure.
The only law enforcement agency that is recognized by the Constitution is the Sheriff's Department.